of weeks ago at a luncheon. Where's Coy? Where's he?
He's in the hall.
Oh, he's down the hall. Never mind. Okay, and we were talking about some of the DXpeditions, and we got to the discussion about radio in a box, and Coy was explaining them, and so I went on YouTube and looked up RIB, radio in a box, and found this video by George, an interview by Tim Duffy of George Waller. George is, how should we say, a very successful businessman. Very successful. He got into point of sale systems out in Asia and the Pacific early on, did very well, sold off his company to finance his amateur radio activities. He's been very involved in a lot of DXpeditions. And they came up constantly with the problem of accessing some of the entities, the islands where you would normally have these DXpeditions. So they came up with the concept, radio in a box. And no, we're not talking about the brand new radio you get from MTC in a box. We're talking about a portable unit. He'll demonstrate this here in just a minute. Tim Duffy, as you probably are aware, was in the Oklahoma City area for over 13 years, and then he signed on with DX Engineering. He runs a podcast. When you look, on a side note, if you look at Tim, the background of Tim's podcast, you'll see a portion of his contest station. If you look even further to the wall behind him, it is covered literally from floor to ceiling, side to side, with plaques that his contest station has won. And that's just, you're seeing probably what, maybe a tenth of the, what I call the K3LR contest buffer. It's in the basement of his home. But George is speaking from his yacht parked off of Florida or the Bahamas or some such place. And he gets involved, or he's talking about the radio in the box concept. Give me a moment here, I will. Can't do this. All the problems you have when you're left-handed.
So thanks to George, and thanks to all of you for watching today. And 73, we'll see you next week here at DX Engineering.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Okay, there you have it. Are we still on here? Yes. Hang on for a question, a couple quick comments. Two things that George didn't cover. First of all, the current generation, first generation of ribs weighed about 85 to 100 pounds. You saw that one huge container that two guys were carrying. The second generation, which they've already built, they've got the weight down to 65 pounds. And that's partially to help handling while they get it to the island, but also that improves the possibility of transporting it via air carriers. Some of the smaller, I'll call them puddle jumper airlines, they couldn't accept that 100-pound package. A 65-pound package they more than likely would be able to handle. Also, he didn't address how they get the rib from the Magnet, which is a big boat, onto the island. Well, they developed what amounts to a mini pontoon boat. And if you go on to YouTube and search George's call sign, you'll see some photos of this little mini pontoon boat. And if you see it proceeding toward the island, you look and you think, that looks like inflatable tires on the side. You think, okay, they're bumpers. No, when it hits the beach, there are 4 what look like lawn tractor tires on each side of the pontoon boat. And once it hits the beach, they can get out and push it up on the beach and set up the rib. And when they're done, they push it back in the water and go back out to the boat. So they kind of thought thought this out very well. Right now, there are 6 first-generation ribs, and they're being set aside for the Jarvis. When does that one kind of occur, or has it occurred?
It's coming up,
Okay.
not
They're-
real quick.
Yeah, they're gonna set up 6 ribs on Jarvis Island. They keep 6 of them on Wallner's boat, and the 7th one is kept by the Northern DX Association. They loan these out. So if somebody wants to do a DXpedition where it's gonna be difficult to get licensed because of ecological restrictions, or just getting to the island like we saw with Bouvier, where people were literally having to swim ashore, they'll loan them out to those DXpeditions. And hopefully we'll see a lot more entities that have been rather rare come on the air a lot sooner. Terry, you had a question?
The obvious one is a cost.
A lot.
Unpublished.
If you look at everything that's in the box, you're well into 5 figures, because just the flex radio, the amplifier, essentially a custom built power regulation. I thought it kind of odd the cooling was done by water, but I guess they've got it all figured out, so water and electricity don't mix. But you're talking a serious amount of money for each
Okay,
one of those boxes.
there's a lot of single point of failure in there, and when Tim asked him about what's your likelihood, the first thing that came to mind was Murphy, and the fact that the guy carrying something is gonna drop it, break it, kick the fuel can over, bend a wire. So excluding the human Murphy factor, it's that virtually everything in there was a single point of failure. So it looks to me like they need to have a box on the boat of dupes, like the cooling fan. They lose that cooling fan and they're screwed.
Yeah.
Lose any pump thing and so it looks to me like they need everything but the radios probably and antennas have to be duped.
Well, that's part of their philosophy will be, for example, if they send a DXpedition out with one rib that goes to the island or wherever, they will have a second one in standby.
That's great, but that's an awfully expensive way, because some of that stuff is cheap, but single point of failure stuff, and I would have
But really,
It's easier to change the whole assembly than to piece and part it on the island.
and you
That's
consider
the
the
military concept.
the cost of a DXpedition. You're looking at many of them upwards $500,000. This is far more economically sustainable than the traditional DXpedition.
One of the things I noticed was the cooling fans are the same thing they're putting in high-end gaming computers at this point in time. All the processors in those super high gamer machines, the processors are water cooled.
It's very, very robust system. Steve, you had a question?
Well, it's more of a comment. Thinking about your comment about single point of failure, Terry, the 2 important components are the amp and the radio. So if you could have a spare box without an amp and a radio sitting there, it's almost no weight. You take the amp and the radio out of the broken box where something may have failed, put it in the new box, you're good to go. So I don't think that they would have to have a lot of expense to have backup parts and contingency planning. I'm just guessing on that, sorry.
essentially, they need a junk door.
Well, if you look at some of the other videos that are available online, they talk about they're trying to make these as robust as possible to minimize the single point failure and try to build as much reliability into it as possible.
So we're gonna do a field day this way?
They're gonna do a field day, I think that's what their plan is on Jarvis, aren't they gonna be there on field day weekend, Coy?
They're gonna be there quite a while. It's a big operation.
Lucian, you have a question?
Yeah, so my naive question is, apparently there's no rules in the DX world that the operators have to physically be on
The transmitter
Location.
has, Coy, back me up on this or contradict me, or Coy, why don't you comment on that?
Yes, as long as the transmitter is actually transmitting from the island, that's all that matters.
Oh, okay.
Now, anyone that's operating that transmitter has to be licensed for that island.
Entity.
Whether it's through a satellite, whether it's off a boat, or wherever, they have to be licensed to operate from that island because that's where the transmitter is transmitting from.
And on top of that, he says the boat is, well, he's got one that's what, 20 miles away by satellite, but they're doing most of their control within 3 miles of the island, and under 90% of the international law, if you're within 3 miles of a piece of land, you're in that jurisdiction.
Yeah. One of the other things, they didn't mention it in this video, but, another one they do, down the road, besides having folks on the boat operating, they're going to let folks from around the world via satellite operate, the station.
they're
Like
already
if
doing
Bouvier
that.
was set up, they would, I guess it's gonna cost you a little chunk of change, but, via satellite, you could operate from Bouvier Island.